Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to take a look at some really cool books that have seen their values decline over the last few months. And essentially what I'm going to attempt to do is to answer the question as to whether now is the time to snag these books. Now, what's important to remember is that everyone's financial situation is a little bit different, so you want to take some time to evaluate for yourself whether the time is right. With that said, let's get to the books. All right, so the first book that we're going to look at is one that is top of mind for me right now because I just finished watching the Morbius movie on Netflix. And as I said on Instagram and also here on YouTube, the Morbius movie was not trash, at least in my opinion. And maybe I am a little biased because I am a huge fan of anything that involves vampires. But in reading the comments, it appears that there were some other people out there that agreed with me as well that this movie was not a terrible movie. It was not a perfect movie, but it also was not as bad as people made it out to be. And so this is the first appearance of Morbius, the living vampire. Again, Amazing Spider-Man issue number 101. This is a pretty cool book, a book that I have in my collection as every Amazing Spider-Man book. So let's scroll down. Let's take a look specifically at the 8.5 of this book. And part of the reason why I picked the 8.5 is because it is the very first book on the list here from Go Collect that actually has a sale within the last 30 days. So I felt that was a good starting place. And so as you look at this, basically what you see is that we are looking at the 8.5. There are 380 copies of this on the census and 200 recorded sales. The book currently has an FMV of $1,000. And you can see here what it looks like for the 1 year and also what it looks like for the 30-day. And so as we drill down into this, want to take a little bit of a closer look here, we can see that in September, this book sold for $1,026. And I want to back up just a little bit, maybe to look at June. June of this year, this book was selling for $1,591, and it has gone from $1,591 in June to $1,026 in September. That is a decrease of $565. And again, you can kind of see that play out here when you look off to the right-hand side, the 1 year all the way down to the 30-day average. And you can see it additionally play out here in some of the individual sales that you see. You can see most recent sale, $930. Before that, $1,100. 1,050 and then back at 968. So this one is kind of bounced all around, man. If you go back to earlier in the year, 2,150 for this book. Imagine having bought that book back in the early part of the year to see where it is right now. And again, this potentially is not a bad book to pick up, especially if it is a book that you have had your sights on for quite some time. Let's look at one additional book. This is the 8.0. And again, the 8.0 also has some 30-day sales here. You can see it here on the very end. There are 404 copies of this on the census. Slightly more sales, 229, slightly lower FMV at 975. But let's go ahead and click on this one and drill down into some of the data. And what we see here is that most recently this book was selling for $961. Again, slightly less than the 8.5. And if we were to back up to June, this book in June was going for $1,167, so roughly a $200 decline from June to where we are right now. So not a huge fall off, but definitely a decline. And you can see that again play out here when you look at it graphically on the left hand side, and then you can certainly see it play out here on the right hand side. If you even back up for the 8.5 or the 8.0 that we're looking at right now, if you back up and look at the 1 year average and look at where the book is sitting right now, the fall off becomes even more dramatic. It becomes even more dramatic between the 1 year and the 30-day with this book. And as I mentioned before, that this is potentially not a terrible book to pick up. And I say that because could the price of this book decline even more? Potentially, with all of the things that are happening out there right now. Potentially the value of this book could continue to decline, or the value could stabilize. And that's one of the hard things. This is the first appearance of what I would say is an important character. It's an important character from 1971, right? It is a key issue. There are Morbius fans out there. There are some people like me that have watched the movie that actually enjoyed the movie. And this is not a terrible book to have in one's collection. If you're a Spider-Man collector, if you're a Morbius fan, this is not a terrible book. And again, as you look at what's happening with the value of this book, this potentially is not a bad time to pick it up. And again, the big question is, will this book stabilize? If you go back to 2020, this book was sitting at about 845, which is not too far off of where it is right now at 961. If you back up a little bit more, this book was back in, let's go back further, 700 or so dollars back to 2019. Will it ever get that low again? I honestly don't know. I mean, we definitely saw a huge run up in values of books in 2020 and 2021, and some books in 2022 even. But a lot of those books have come down in value and then kind of stabilized a little bit higher than maybe they were prior to the run up in the time frame that I just highlighted. So again, this is one book to definitely keep an eye on. And so, again, we don't know what's going to happen with this, but it's definitely one that I am keeping my eye on just because, again, the Morbius thing intrigues me now that I've now seen the movie, and that's why it was like top of mind. So, speaking of movies, there is another one that I want to look at here that is also associated with a movie, but this movie also, like Morbius, is in the rearview mirror. This movie also was not well received. It was not well received. The most recent Wonder Woman movie was not as well received as the first. I think the actress has now signed up to maybe do some other appearances in other movies. I think I saw something like that recently. But we are now talking about Wonder Woman issue number 1. And this book contains the origin of Wonder Woman. There's also a couple of first appearances in this one as well. This one is from 1987. This book recently, I feel like, had a little bit of a resurgence, partly because of Wonder Woman, but then also because of George Perez and his affiliation with this book as well. So with this one, I want to take a look at the 9.8 because, again, for a book of this age, I think the sweet spot is probably around the 9.8. As you can see here from the data, there are 889 copies of this book on the CGC census. There have been 471 sales. This book has a pretty low FMV at $190 for a 9.8. And you can see how it looks here at the 1 year and also the 30 day. So let's go ahead and click on this thing and see what it looks like. And the most recent sale for this book was September, $167. And I want to back up a little bit here to maybe if I can find March, where can find March? There it is, March. All right. So March, this book was going for $341. And if you fast forward to September, that's about $185 or so decline. That was the high watermark for this book. The high watermark for this book was in March of 2022. That's the highest that it's ever been, at least in recent history, going back to 2008. I'm pretty sure that's probably just the highest it's ever been. So definitely not a wildly expensive book in any way, shape, or form. And you can see here that there's roughly 2,200 graded copies of this book at a 9.8 on the census. So let's, sorry, 2,200 period, 2,200 period on the census blue label. All right. So again, not a terrible book to potentially pick up if this is one that you've been looking at. Will its price come down to maybe where it was previously? I don't know. Again, if you go back to like 2019, this book was going for $85 at a 9.5. Who knows whether it's going to reset that low? Back in 2021, it was at 131. And again, right now we're at 167 for this book. So again, not a terrible book to pick up, especially if it's one that you've had your sight set on for quite some time. So jump back too far there. So let me go back here real quick because I wanted to point out something here that was happening a little bit strange with this book. So the 9.8, we definitely see the decline from the 1 year to the 90 day, and then to the 30 day, we see the value of this book. And then as we looked at not just the average for the 30 day, but a specific sale, it was even lower at 167. But when you look here at the 9.6, you see something different happening. This book a year ago was going for 115 at a 9.6. It dropped down to 110 at the 90-day, and then jumped back up to 140 at the 30-day, which I find a little fascinating. You can see that same trend kind of play out here with the 9.4. It was $78, jumped up to 85, and then jumped up to 133. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I do not think that that plays out as you look at the other sale here, specifically the 9.2. You can see the 1 year drops to the 90 and then drops, oh no, stay steady at the 30-day, but that's a more predictable thing. What's happening for the 9.6 and the 9.4, I'm not quite sure what to make of that. Again, it kind of bucks the trend that we see with the 9.8 and with the 9.2. So I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to people. Again, there's a potential that this book's value could potentially decline. Only time will tell whether that will happen. I have several copies of this book. I think I have maybe one copy that is off at CGC and has been for a while. That fingers crossed will come back at a 9.8, but we will see what will happen. It's been there a while, so maybe when I sent it, it might have been closer to this, but unfortunately, when I get it back, it may be closer to that 167 number that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. So all right, so the next book that I want to look at, I think it's a really popular book. It is a popular book that a lot of people have really wanted. It is also hanging on the wall behind me. I have two copies of this book specifically. One of them is on the wall behind me, and we are talking about Fantastic Four 48. This is the first appearance of Silver Surfer and also the first appearance of Galactus, although a cameo. Very, very cool book. With Uatu here, the Watcher, in his purple slippers. I am a huge fan of the purple slipper. So let's blow this up a little bit better so you guys can see it. And we're gonna go down to a respectable copy, a respectable grade for this book in terms of the dollar amount. We're gonna first look at a 2.0. There are 131 copies of this book on the census at a 2.0, 43 sales. This book has an FMV, a fair market value of $13.50. And you can see here that the 1 year at about 13 dropped to 12, dropped to about 1140. And so let's go ahead and click on this and then drill into this one. Even though we just saw that trend, what we are starting to see right now is that the value of this book is starting to creep up versus where it was. If you look at the most recent sale for this book, let me scroll down a little bit. What is that? Yeah. So the most recent sale for this book in August was $1,219. And you back up to the sale before that in July, the book was $1,075. And again, that's a little bit of a jump from basically, let me go back from June to August. That was an increase. And before that, the book was sitting in May at 15. So it went from 15 to 1,000. Back up to 12. There is the possibility that the value of this book will continue to creep up. And I say that partially because of, the people still being really excited about the Fantastic Four eventually coming to the MCU. So what we could have seen has been a momentary dip in the value of this book. It'll be interesting to see whether this continues to climb up or whether that this most recent sale was just a momentary blip increase because somebody wanted this book. But you can see here there were a couple of sales here, one of $1,140 and one of basically $1,300 that may have contributed to this jump up that we're seeing there. So I want to back up. And I want to look at another copy of this book, another respectable copy. This is going to be a 2.5. There are 241 of these on the census. And again, you can see here play out on the trend line with the averages, 1554 for the 1 year average. The 90-day is 1475. And it appears that the average is now increasing, going back up to where it was for the 1 year. So let's click on it and look at the data. And again, graphically, you can see it play out here as well. The most recent sale in August was $15.50 for this book. And if you back up to July, $13.95. If you back up from that, this book was going for, let me see if I can get my cursor there, $13.32. So again, this potentially is not a bad book to pick up if it's one that you've been looking at, because maybe this trend line will continue to increase. And if you back up just a little bit, the high water mark for this book was in July of 2021 at about 1953. 1953. Nope, I told you a story there. 1981 1 in May appears to be the high water mark for this book. So high water was in May. And again, we are looking at about 1550 for this book. This is a book that I thankfully bought. I bought this book back in like 2018, and 20 yeah, I think it was about 2018. And I honestly wish that I had bought more copies of it back then because of how this book has basically performed. So again, we do see again a trend from the 2.0 to the 2.5 where the values appear to be increasing for this book. Is it going to continue? Who knows? Who knows? But if it's one that's been on your radar, maybe now is the time to jump on this one before that trend line goes up even more. I want to look at one more here. I want to look at the 3.0. There are 436 copies of this book on the census, 164 sales. And again, here you can see based upon the averages, the trend is downward, right? So 1543 at the 1 year, the 90 day is 1241 and the 30 day is 1230. But let's go ahead and click on it and see. Let's see how this is playing out. There is something different happening for the 3.0. You can see the most recent sale for this book in August was 1154. 1154 was the most recent sale for a 3.0 blue label of FF48. But we back up. Let's back up to June. Back up to June, the book was going for $14.45. That is a decrease of $291. And again, same thing here. Will we potentially see this trend bounce back up in the other direction? No clue. Somebody may have, well, I wonder how much they pay for that. We may have to go and research that one. This was a best offer that was originally made for $200 that somebody accepted a best offer for. So who knows how much it went for? Maybe it was closer to this 1200 mark that we see over here. Somebody else again tried to get it for 2000 and accepted a best offer at some other point. So just interesting stuff that happens with the data. Not all books trend the same way at the same time, and there's maybe reasons for it. Maybe it's the outlet, maybe it's the number of copies that are available, maybe it's the person that happened to buy the book that decided that this was the book for them, this was the time, they had the cash, so they had to go for it. So it's important that when you set your sights on a book, you take some time to dig into the data across the various grades that you think you can afford, and then you try to make the best decision possible. So I want to look at one additional book here. I want to look at one additional book that is also associated with a TV show right now. This is the Savage She-Hulk issue #1, and this is the origin of She-Hulk, first appearance of the character as well. Jim Shooter was the editor back in the day, and Stan Lee actually wrote the script for this one. This book was released in 1980. So with this book, again, I think the sweet spot for this one, in my opinion, is the 9.8. I do not have a 9.8. but I still think that that's the sweet spot. You can see here from the data that there are 2,480 copies of this book on the CGC census. Sales, wow, a lot of sales, 1710. Lot of copies of this book have traded hands. The fair market value for this book is sitting at $650. The 1 year average $943. You can see the 30 day has dropped to $661. So let's go ahead and click on this one and take a closer look at the data and just look at the graph. Just look at the graph on that one, right? The most recent sale for this book in September, $643. $643. And if we back up a little bit, let's back up to June. In June, this book was going for $833. That is a fall off of only about $200, about $190 between the June value of this book and the September value. But if you back up even more, this book in January of this year, this book was going for $1389. $1389. You back up even more. May, book was going for $1630. And I think this is potentially around the time that the She-Hulk TV show was announced. And this book has honestly not done much other than drop in value. And this is a really interesting thing where this book is almost doing the opposite of what you would expect it to do, given that there is a TV show out there. I know there's a lot of people that don't care for this show, but there are also a lot of folks out there that are genuinely enjoying the carefree nature of She-Hulk. But this is interesting how this one is actually playing out here. And again, if you back up that 16, imagine Imagine if you bought this book for $16.30 back in 2021 to see it go to where it is right now. I mean, that is $1,000 loss. That is $1,000 loss roughly between where it was and where it is right now. Again, if this is a book that is on your radar, maybe now, I don't know, maybe now. If you go back to December of 19, this book was going for $400. We're at about $600 right now. Who knows where the new reset will be? And I know there's a lot of people out there that are keeping their powder dry, trying to figure out where the bottom is. The reality is, I don't know if we know where the bottom is for any of these books. And so that's part of the reason why I do this video series, to basically highlight a couple of books that are out there that folks may have had on their radar that they may want to consider picking up. So with that, we are going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch. I hope that you enjoyed this installment of Snag These Books Now. And rest assured that more books, more videos are going to be coming. And if there's a book that you want me to take a look at, don't be shy about leaving that suggestion in the comment section for me. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.